Interstate 64. Wow. Interstate 64 is a beautiful road. It goes through some very scenic places. It is the first east-west interstate that we have covered since I-44, amazingly. Wow. It is also the first time we're going to get to a new state since I-39. We see I-64 traverses the distance between St. Louis, roughly, and the Hampton Roads area of Virginia. You're watching Control City Freak. This is the YouTube channel where we talk about interstate highways and the places that they are assigned to go to. If you like this kind of content, please give us a like, or better yet, please subscribe. Today we're going to talk about eastbound Interstate 64. I-64 begins here in Wentzville, Missouri, with an intersection with I-70, along with US 61 and US 40. It is signed for Chesterfield to start, which I don't love for sure. I don't really like seeing two-digit interstates signed for suburbs. But the problem is 64 and 70 both go to downtown St. Louis. 64 is actually 1 mile shorter and 1 minute faster, so it probably should be signed for St. Louis, and 70 you could sign for Illinois or for Indianapolis or for Chicago until meeting 270. Or you could say 70 St. Louis and Lambert Airport and 64 St. Louis and Forest Park. Something besides Chesterfield though. And in fact, at the very first junction that I-64 has after meeting 70, it is indeed signed for St. Louis. Here's the bridge across the Missouri River. Looks like this is the second span added, and then it used to be just the other one back when this was only Highway 40 and not US 64. We meet 270, and not surprisingly, 64 is signed for St. Louis. Here in downtown St. Louis, we come into a double-decker situation. Not common in the Midwest, but you see it here. We are also signed for East 64, Illinois at this point. Right as we come into the double-decker, we see that 6th Street is the last Missouri exit. You do not have an option to get onto I-44, I-55, or I-70 on the Missouri side of the river. Here is the exit for Busch Stadium, which has given us such delightful things as St. Louis Cardinals fans and corporate name stadiums. Go Royals. I do think it's interesting that we have this sign for just Illinois also here. A little hard to see, but it's right there in the truss of the bridge right there. Now we cross the Poplar Street Bridge once again, and we are signed for Chicago, Louisville, and Indianapolis, all lanes. And this East St. Louis thing, because that's the local lanes where this road is going to split, but both will end up in the same place. Now we once again see this same sign we saw on I-55, where both signs are exactly identical. This is in the local lanes. I like this sign just because, wow, there's a lot of shields up on that sign. No room for any control cities when we've got 6 shields up there. And hilariously, we get the Welcome to Illinois sign 3 miles into Illinois. There's been many gantries before now. Don't know why they didn't use it earlier. And 64 will now sign for East Louisville. Here is where 64 actually cuts off from 55 and 70. And now we are on the old original section of I-64, and it is signed for Louisville. Here we have an interchange, not too surprising. We know that IDOT loves to do this. We have 64 signed East Mount Vernon, West St. Louis instead of East St. Louis. Kind of surprising. Maybe because we're still in the St. Louis metro area here. And now 64 meets I-255. This is a little weird. IDOT usually doesn't do this. On the main lines, we don't usually see these secondary control cities like this, but here we see 64 East Mount Vernon. Don't really care for that. However, the mileage sign shows us that Louisville is still the primary control city here, not Mount Vernon. We are approaching I-57, which is also the way to I-24, so they give us a sign for that here. And now we meet I-57 in Mount Vernon, Illinois, once again. Never thought I'd be in Mount Vernon, Illinois so often. In Mount Vernon, we are signed for 57 South Cairo and 64 East Evansville. Again, not sure why IDOT is signing secondary cities in other states, but here we are. Interestingly, I've actually been to this very exit. I stayed in Mount Vernon once when I was driving a truck down to my dad's house, and I got trashed at that Applebee's. It was very fun, that Applebee's in that picture. Here we have 64 and 57 splitting off, and 64 heads east to Louisville. Pretty sensible control cities here, Evansville, Louisville. Welcome to Indiana! All right, first time we get to a new state in a whole lot of episodes. Random interchanges in Indiana don't seem to play games the way that they do in Illinois. 64 is not signed for Evansville here, it is signed for Louisville. Louisville remains the primary control city on the mileage signs. Here we meet I-69. We'll be doing that one soon. It's signed for Evansville and Henderson, Kentucky for some reason. Northbound has no control city, but I imagine they will be putting Indianapolis on there. We see on the actual ramp for northbound, still no control city. Beyond Evansville, things keep staying as they were. 3 cities signed in Indiana, Louisville the primary control. Now we get New Albany and Louisville. I'm not entirely sure why we get New Albany here. It's a suburb, but okay. Now we cross the Ohio River on another double-decker. Interesting. You don't see that many double-deckers, and we got 2 on I-64. Also, interestingly, I-64 is one of only 2 interstates that cross the Mississippi, Missouri, and Ohio rivers, along with I-70. On the Kentucky side, now we're getting Louisville, Lexington, and 264 for Shively. That's fine. It's signing suburbs for a 3-digit interstate. Welcome to Kentucky. We approach Louisville along the Ohio River, and we've got I-65 coming soon, Nashville and Indianapolis. Here we near downtown Louisville. We have the exit for it. Nashville, Indianapolis, 1 mile, and we are now on 64 East Lexington. Fine choice. Here's an image of downtown Louisville, the downtown Louisville skyline. You can also see a little bit of the bridge that Secretariat or BoJack Horseman's father jumped off of in BoJack Horseman. This is kind of interesting. So the University of Louisville plays basketball in a downtown arena instead of on campus. They've got a NBA-style arena. Here's another look at that BoJack Bridge, and we are approaching 65 and 71. Here we split with I-71 north for Cincinnati, 64 East Lexington. So this is as far as I've ever been on I-64 personally. It was all new for me from here on out. And we get 264 Watterson Expressway. And now we meet 265, the Gene Snyder Freeway. I don't know. I feel like knowing the name of the freeway would be less important for travelers than knowing where it goes, but that's just me. Also, Louisville, why are you doing 264 and 265? That seems needlessly confusing. Why not make one of them a 4 or a 6 or an 8? Lexington remains our primary control city throughout the rest of this stretch in Kentucky, and it exits in Kentucky. Lexington is still signed for the control city. Now we meet I-75 in the Lexington area, and we're going to be on E64 South 75, Lexington Ashland. 75 and 64 split, so now we're on Winchester Ashland. Huh? I'd never heard of either of those places before making this video. That seems like a weird choice, and not surprisingly, they are both in Kentucky. We're not going to sign anywhere out of state. We get our sign, Winchester, Ashland, and we get a big overhead sign, 64 Ashland. I-64 doesn't actually get particularly close to Ashland. That's why it's such a puzzling control city. US 60 is a shortcut to Ashland, but they don't sign 60 for Ashland. There's only 2 potential exits for Ashland, and they don't put Ashland on one of the exits. Really weird. You see it's still 13 miles not to Ashland, but to the Ashland exit. And at the exit for Ashland, we are signed for Huntington, West Virginia, which I-64 actually does go to, and probably should have been what was signed in Lexington. Welcome to West Virginia. Boom. That's how you do a welcome to state sign. All you other states, you're on notice. West Virginia is leading the charge here. That thing is awesome. And not surprisingly, West Virginia is signing 64 for Huntington here. Once we approach Huntington, we start getting signs for Charleston, which makes sense. Bigger city for West Virginia. It's the state capital. 64 East, Huntington, Charleston, as we near Huntington here. And on the other side of Huntington, it is Charleston as the primary control city. Here we are meeting I-77 and I-79 for Parkersburg and Beckley. 64 and 77 are signed for Beckley. Probably not the greatest choice, but I'll allow it here because Beckley is where they are going to split. Here's a look at downtown Charleston, West Virginia. And now we cross the Jaeger Bridge. Nice. Wonder what the speed limit is on that bridge. We are on the West Virginia Turnpike and merged with I-77, Beckley 50, Bluefield 93. I mean, that's where 77 leaves West Virginia, but still, I don't know. West Virginia Turnpike is quite a beautiful road from what I could see. It's right up in the mountains, looks really nice. I would very much like to drive it someday. And now we have 64 and 77 splitting for Louisburg and Bluefield. Louisburg is 3,000 people. I looked it up. What are we doing here? After splitting with 77, we're still not quite to Beckley yet, or maybe I put this slide in out of order. But Lexington, Virginia becomes the final primary control city here after Louisburg. And within Louisburg, it is 64 East, Lexington, Virginia. I feel like this is confusing too, since Lexington, Kentucky is also on I-64, and it's much, much more well-known than Lexington, Virginia. I'd say sign Richmond. And now we have still Lexington, VA, 72. Welcome to Virginia. All right, our third new state today. Virginia is for lovers. That sign reminds me, when I was a kid, I used to always get the Rand McNally Road Atlas every year, and it had all of these things you could mail in for state guidebooks and maps and stuff that was all free. And I got this 170 page long Virginia is for Lovers book. Wow, awesome. And Virginia, you have won my love here with this sign for Richmond straight off the bat. Now we're meeting I-81 and we are going to be signing for Staunton and Winchester. Why? Those are both on I-81. What's weird is 64 has a lot of concurrencies with odd-numbered freeways, and it is the B road on all of them. It is not using its own miles. It merges onto the road, not having the road merge onto it, and it uses the other road's control cities. Staunton, 32, Winchester, 123, and now we finally get 64 East Richmond. I mean, Richmond, a lot more famous than Winchester, am I right? Why is 8164 not signed for Richmond instead of for Winchester? Richmond holds up. We now got Richmond 103, and at exits, it is also Richmond. Here we come into Richmond. We meet 95 North Washington. We're concurrent with I-95 for a little bit, and now we're getting 64 East Norfolk and 95 South Petersburg. I don't love that either, but 95, after going through the busiest part of the country, is now going to go through an awful lot of small towns before it gets to Florida. So I guess Petersburg. 64 East Norfolk with 295 signed for Rocky Mount, North Carolina and Washington. Sensible controlled cities here, places people have heard of: Williamsburg, Newport News, Norfolk. And we meet 664 signed for downtown Newport News, Suffolk and Chesapeake. And it's actually the shortcut to the end of I-64. I don't think too many people actually drive I-64 all the way to its end, unless, road geeks like me would probably do it. But to get to where you want to go, I-64 becomes a little weird in the Hampton roads. I-64 has one of these sweet bridge tunnels that, for some reason, really only exist in that part of the country. Now in the outskirts of Norfolk, 64 is now signed for Virginia Beach. 64 doesn't actually make it to Virginia Beach. What's kind of interesting, in the Hampton Roads, 64 is kind of its own beltway. It is the Hampton Roads Beltway, so it is kind of encircling itself. 264 East, Virginia Beach, and on 64 we're now signed for Chesapeake and Suffolk. Interestingly, here we don't have directions for I-64 anymore. It doesn't say East 64, because 64 in this area is actually going west. It's looped completely around and is going the other direction now. And here is the final interchange of I-64. We meet 664 and 264. I think this split is pretty cool because you have the end 64 begin 664 and end 64 begin 264. Those are pretty neat. I like that. All right, let's take a look at Todd's the way it should be on I-64. There are definitely some changes I would make. All right, let's look at East. For East, I would get rid of Chesterfield, sign St. Louis. Louisville I like, Lexington I like. I'd go to Huntington and leave out Ashland, and then Charleston, Beckley, because it's where it splits. Then I'd go right from Beckley to Richmond, then Norfolk, Virginia Beach, and Chesapeake, where it actually ends. Thank you for watching this episode of Control City Freak. I really appreciate it. Looking forward to looking at Westbound 64 coming up soon. My name is Todd, and keep on trucking.